Like, yeah, so it was strange. And then after all that, you go to the MCG and lose the toss. And it looked like uh, it was a cloudy morning, if I'm not mistaken. Or no, it was a sunny morning as well. What am I saying? Yeah, and the next morning was cloudy. Because I remember taking a picture from the same spot on that little bridge before you reach Richmond Station and tweeting about it as well, saying it was sunny yesterday. It's look how cloudy it is this morning. It's like the bad clouds are following India. And then everything changed once Ashwin came on to bowl in that 10th over or something. I remember seeing him warming up when the 8th over was on. He does warm up for quite a while. Both him and Nathan Lyon, like they warm up for a long time before they come on. But I was like, wow, Ashwin's going to come on to bowl. Like, there's something, and it's not like India started too badly. I think Matthew Wade did a few boundaries. It looked like a very like a random start to the day. But yeah, Ashwin coming on and taking a wicket, that for me said a lot of things, because Rahane is that kind of guy, right? He's just quiet. He's a quiet achiever, such an Indian term, but it's he's very tough inside. I remember seeing a lot of him. I mean, I've covered a lot of Rahane back in Bombay. Like, kind of we came into the profession into the industry together. Like a lot of these guys who were part of this test team. But the practice game they played, the day game they played in, where did they play? It feels like a long time ago. But the first warm-up game they played, it was played on a very sporting pitch. The ball was doing all sorts in Sydney. And Rahane batted really well. Like, he didn't score too many runs, but he just batted really, really well. And it was a weird press box. It was just like one room adjoining the Indian dressing room. And at one point, I had to shut Rishabh Pant up because there were not too many journalists, 2 or 3 Australian journalists, and he was going on and on with someone, like, aisa hone ke baad, you could, like, then they, like, a couple of them are agency reporters, so they just said, man, can you ask her? I said, then I actually shouted, I said, like, Are aram se yaar, there are like people working here, like, yeah. Like, there was a little curtain, so they didn't even know. I didn't even know who I was speaking to. I recognized the Rishabh Pant laugh. So, but because we were so close, and like, Rahane and these guys would come and have like a brief chat. Arey kaisa hai, bahut din se, Australia kaisa hai, and like, in between when the game was on. But I just remember watching him before he went out to bat a couple of times, and like, he would sit down. He gets into the zone. Like a lot of batsmen get into a zone. But with him, he almost gets into this Zen-like mode. His expression, it's just, and then he almost shakes it off, and he is very unflappable that way. Like he's always the same, right? Whether he's doing well or whether he's not doing well. And you needed someone like Rahane who's not very, like I said, he's confident, and his aggression comes through being quiet. Like, almost, some people are like Virat Kohli. Their aggression is very different to Ajinkya Rahane's aggression. It's in his eyes, right? Like, his eyes speak aggression. Like, it's similar with Pujara. And not all quiet people are aggressive. That's not what I'm saying. But Pujara and Rahane, just the grit is a form of aggression for them. And the innings he played in Melbourne was splendid. But I think more than anything, his captaincy on day one, alongside, like, Ashwin's bowling and all that, just turned the series around. And and this is not me burying Virat Kohli or saying that, oh, people are scared of Virat Kohli or something, but it's just a different personality, which Rahane. So you could see that people, like, the players are a lot more open. They were going to him a lot more with suggestions. I remember at one point, on day one, Ashwin had bowled 5 overs, and then Rahane had asked Umesh Yadav to come in to bowl. And I remember Ashwin storming towards Rahane and saying, no, I need one more over. And he was like, all right, go and bowl another over. I'm not saying Ashwin would not have done it with Kohli as captain, but would he have? I don't know. Like, or would he have got that extra over? Again, I don't know. So it's just that you could see that, and the line I said and I wrote as well is, you could see that when Virat Kohli is captain, a lot of players try to live up to his expectations, and it has happened with pretty much every great cricketer who's been captain, whether it was when Tendulkar was captain or whether when it's Gary Sobers was captain. I've heard stories from his time. Uh, when you have a great captaining you, you almost want to live up to his expectations, right? But with Rahane, you could see that people were trying to live up to their own expectations. Like they were trying to be the best they can be, as the cliche goes. And I think that really led to everybody performing and outperforming themselves as the series went on.
Wow, it's bringing back kind of goosebumps. I was 1-1 going into Sydney. Bharat, talk us through that Sydney Test match, right? You wrote an article called "The Summer of Siraj." There was the issues with alleged racial abuse from the stands. You came out very strongly talking about the issues that you face personally as well. There was a very moving video with Mel that you did, and I mean, with all that emotion that had built up, you'd seen the drama with the restaurant and the quarantine breach and all of that kind of distraction off field. There was India filed a complaint for alleging racial abuse by the people who were ejected from the crowd as well. So to draw that test match with that almost impossible performance by Jadeja with a broken finger, with Ashwin with a destroyed hamstring, Vihari couldn't run, Pant scored 97 with a damaged elbow. He didn't keep wicket in the second innings. Saha had to come and take over from him. Um, it was almost like this Indian team had decided to make a last stand. It was like a old school Western, and even though there was one Test match to go, it was like this is it. I mean, and in the World Test, in the context of the World Test Championship, as we saw later, that draw was so important, right? I mean, so what did you make of that performance? I mean, there were so many heroes, and you talked about tweeting about Hanuma Vihari. I actually, for some reason, just tweeted out Hanuma Vihari will be batting at the end of this test match, earning us a famous draw save this tweet, because I felt cricket owed him. He'd been run out in the first innings after a fantastic piece of fielding, I think by Hazelwood or someone, just
Hazelwood, yeah.
impossible to think about. And he dropped catches, and it was like he hadn't got runs in the rest of the tour. But that that innings from Vihari and Ashwin and Pant, and I mean, was there a siege mentality that had developed in this team by that stage?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of mentality, going back to how India recovered from 36 and the defeat in Adelaide, one thing that Ravi Shastri and this team management has done is they've really eliminated the fear of failure. Where, when Ashwin talks about how Ravi Shastri said, like, wear 36 as a badge on your, like, badge of honor, they mean it. I mean, it's not just a line. Like, it's not like Ravi Shastri's line, like one of those many lines that become famous, because they really go out there. You can see that now, like, even in that series against England back home, you can see that they don't fear failure, and you can see that's why they are able to come back so well. And the Sydney Test for me was the greatest example. It really stands out as the most bizarre last day I've ever covered in my career, or maybe ever seen, because like we said, in Adelaide they lost face, they lost their pride, they lost everything. Then they win in Melbourne. In Sydney, like, it felt like some hospital ward, right? You'd hear all this. Lenny Pascoe and Jeff Thompson apparently had a ward in Blacktown where they played, which is called unofficially called the Pascoe Thomo ward, because they would keep injuring people and sending them there. This felt like that, and I remember telling Ashwin this after that test. I saw from where I was sitting, I kept looking at the Indian dressing room, and Ashwin wasn't sitting down. This is when the rest, Rishabh Pant and Pujara, were having their partnership. And initially, I thought, and Vihari he wasn't moving from his chair. I thought this is the classic old school superstition. They're not like moving. And I remember tweeting early on in the day saying, oh, something's up. Like, Ashwin's not sitting down. They're being very superstitious. And then I was like, I don't think he'll just keep standing like forever. Like, doesn't, and even after a wicket fell, he was still standing. And I was like, oh, there's something like, something more to this. And I like, every ball I was like, I would watch the ball, see what's happening, and then immediately like turn my binoculars towards the dressing room just to see what was happening. And you could see that he was not right, and they didn't know what to do with Jadeja. Jadeja's going in, Jadeja's coming out. His fingers in the in the plaster, like he's padding up, he's not padding up. And while Rishabh Pant and Pujara were batting, it looked like, well, India are they going to chase it down? Like, so there have been so many day fives where you think that a team will chase down a total and then they don't, right? And I was doing radio commentary for this whole series for SEN. So I was going in and out of the commentary box as well, like talking about all this. And while doing commentary, I would like often want to keep like focusing on the dressing room, but you can't when you're like you're in the box and talking constantly, especially on radio. There's no break either. But you could see that something was up. And uh, Hanuma Vihari then pulling his hamstring, and and the team management clearly wanted him to come off. They were like, "Don't ruin your." It was almost felt like, "Don't ruin your career, just come back." And I remember writing this as well. He put his career on the line. Like, I don't think he could have made a bigger sacrifice, because see, right now, yes, he's been picked on. He's back in the Indian team and all that. But think about it, right? Like, he loses his place. Some other guy comes in, makes 200, just saying. And then there's the whole England tour. Maybe Vihari never plays again. I mean, Karun Nair, triple hundred. Where's Karun Nair now? So, and Vihari had not had a great tour with the bat. He looked solid, but not solid enough, I guess. Not scored enough runs. And the team, like Ravi Shastri is asking him to come back, like but Vihari is sending the third man back, or the subsidy or the reserves back, the physio back. The physio's like running out every 2 hours. And then you have this Ashwin who's walking like he's like 65 years old, unable to hold his back. Like, he goes out to bat. And it was the most fascinating partnership I've ever seen in my life. I don't think I'll see a more fascinating partnership. Like, one can't stand, one can't sit, the other can't run, neither can walk. It's they're just standing in, like, they're just there. They're immovable objects almost. And after the tea break, that first spell from Cummins and Hazelwood, like, they're just going after Ashwin. He's just wearing it everywhere. And then, of course, there was I mean, the most romantic thing I've ever seen in a cricket match is them sharing that thigh pad which they had like stuck behind each other's back. And at the end of the over, the one would give it to the next, and he would stick it behind his back. Like, how do you, if you're explaining cricket to an American, the old cliche, like, I would actually show them that session and say, this is why a draw matters, right? People are putting their lives on the line, their careers on the line for a draw, not for a win or a loss, right? I mean, it's just amazing. And you could see the Australian spirits just drop. Like, I was in the commentary box with Brad Haddon and a couple of others, and you could see that their admiration for this Indian team, like, it began in Melbourne, where like it was more Victorians. Who did you have in Chris Rogers and Damon Fleming and all those? But by the time we moved to Sydney, it was Brad Haddon and those guys. And you could see that their tone had changed. Like, the way they looked at this Indian team changed. And I saw that through the course of the series, especially in the commentary box. And they were rooting for India. They were rooting for India to save that test match. And it was amazing. Like, Australians, for all their they give it to you, man, and all that. Like, when they see someone really show toughness, like Virat Kohli and Stone Cold Steve Austin, there's something about, like, if you play it the Aussie way, as they say, they will they will obsess over you. And they've never seen something like that kind of a rearguard performance. And yeah, I mean, did Australia lose the plot? Of course they did. They relaxed, and all the God, you don't want to. Tim Payne lost his head, as he said later on. He did not have a great day. Dropped catches. It was just a day to forget. And I'm a big Tim Payne fan. I think he works harder on his game than anyone I've seen. Or he's right up there when it comes to people who work on their games. And he just had a forgettable day, and it was remarkable. And yeah, with the racism thing, it was. I'm not a very emotional, sentimental person, and like I've always laughed off everything in my life. Like even with racism, that's why I thought it was necessary for myself to write that piece. And what I said in that piece, some people have criticized me for it. Doesn't matter. Is I said like I'm learning from this guy. Like just because I'm okay with people saying things to me does not mean that I should normalize it. I shouldn't. It's not. Then I'm letting people down, like my own people down. Like you can't normalize things which, because if it doesn't hurt my sentiments, does not mean that hey, chalna. Because then what I'm doing is saying the five Indians or five colored people whose sentiments get hurt. Um, I'm kind of selling them down the river. I'm basically saying, oh, if they react, like it's on them. I mean, it's their fault. Like everybody should be like me. And I realized after the way a young cricketer could bring like play to a stop during this like exciting test match. Cam Green was hitting sixes everywhere. Just tells you that people should stand up, and the standing up does not mean going and punching someone in the face, but just like say, look, it's not done. You just can't get away with it. I think it was a big moment, not just for Indian cricket, but for Indians and like I think colored people in general. What Mohammad Siraj did that day, and yeah, of course, and in the backdrop of all this, there was this whole drama. Will they go to Brisbane? Of course, I added my I added fuel to the fire. Kind of, I wrote stories about how I mean I didn't want the test match to go to Brisbane. Let's face it, because I realized I can't go to Brisbane. So I was trying my level best to keep that last test in Sydney. Not really, but there was so much happening. It was you're covering the test, but then you're still talking about will they go to Brisbane, will they not, and that evening before, that evening when Siraj complained about the racism, it was it was funny almost like what was happening, not the Siraj thing, but um, everybody had packed up and they were leaving. And then I was like, wait, there's something happening, right? I mean, I told myself through the binoculars, I saw Siraj had stopped and like a couple of, I think Ashwin and Rahane were around him. The security guards were walking down, the match referee is there, and he kept pointing in one direction. And once someone points towards the crowd, you just knew what was happening. Something had happened. Either someone had thrown something or someone had said something, and the rest of the press box had packed up and they were about to leave. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I've noticed this, should I ruin everybody's night or keep it to myself and do a story? But then I realized after a point it's growing too big, it's just a big story. And while that is happening, Nick Hockley, the acting CEO of Cricket Australia, was having a meeting with the Indian medical staff. Clearly that was about should we go to Brisbane or not. I was like, nah, I have to ruin everyone's night. So I called all the Aussie journalists and said, look, there's something happening. Oh, there's something happening there as well. So everybody had to unpack, bring their laptops out, start calling people. Because they'd already picked which pub to go to. And mate, we're going there. Join us here at 7, join us there at 8. But yeah, that was a long night for everyone. It was just not just because of the quality of cricket we saw, but just overall it was just a tour filled with so much drama. And then of course you have to pick how do I go to Brisbane? Should I stay in Brisbane? Should I go to Sydney? You're spending nights in random motels, not knowing where your next night's going to be. It was just full on.
But did you end up going to Brisbane? Or I think that ended your coverage, right? Because you couldn't because of lockdown and there was barriers and stuff. But I mean, of course, Brisbane itself was they did not see you at the Gabba, but India did see Australia at the Gabba. And I mean, I stayed up all night watching it in the UK the last day. I mean, there was I don't even know where to start with that game. There were so many heroes. There was Shardul and Washi with the bat. There was Shubman Gill, Pujara wearing it on his body constantly. There was Rishabh Pant who ended up with 91 or 97. He got 97 in one, 91 in the other. And an entire nation sort of rejoiced and I think won the respect of the Australians for. And we keep calling them a third string Indian team, but that's a very unfair thing to say because they were the best that were available. Natarajan making his debut after taking wickets in the IPL, going as a net bowler, Washington's dad becoming a legendary, iconic figure. I mean, it's it just sounds completely surreal and insane. I think you talked about on one of the other podcasts that whoever's writing the scripts for Indian cricket in the last few months has been a bit high on something pretty strong. So, I mean, none of us could have predicted it. By the fourth test, I think we were happy with. I mean, 2-1 to Australia would have been a fine result. A draw would have been incredible. To win that test match, Bharat. And I know, sorry, we're running short of time because I know you're it's getting a bit late for you, but to win that test match, is that the greatest test series victory that you've covered? For me, we watched the 2001 series, we watched 2005 Ashes, but for me, this was, I mean, staying up all night to watch Gill, Pujara, Pant, Saini, who was injured. It's just incredible to think like that, and to think these guys managed to get across the line.
Yeah, and that bowling attack. I remember the first, so I covered it from Sydney, that test match, but I chose Sydney over Brisbane when we were leaving Melbourne. So because I was doing radio commentary, I watched that whole game from the SEN studio, the SEN's radio station. So again, it was Brad Haddon, me, and Matt White, who was the caller. I remember that morning we were watching everything on TV, and so we were trying to see. I'm trying to see is how many people are making their debuts? Is it one or two? And then Brad Haddon said, no, watch their feet, what kind of shoes are they wearing? I was like, wow, that's a good tip, Brad. Hads, thank you. And and this is not me at the ground, so I'm watching TV and trying to pick. I'm like, oh, everybody's wearing like different kinds of, like, somebody's like in sneakers, somebody's like chappal hi nahi hai. So I didn't know what to make of it. But one thing you learned early, that Bumrah was not going to play, and then I saw Washington Sundar get the call up, and then T Natarajan, and I was like,
Because
wow.
Ashwin was out as well, right? Ashwin was out
Yeah,
as well.
I mean,
And Siraj was leading the bowling attack. I'm
Siraj,
thinking back to it, it just sounds ballistic.
it's it's incredible. Like, I remember in Adelaide, on the day before the first test began, Natarajan was superb in the nets. He was beating everyone, and I kept tweeting about Natarajan is doing this, Natarajan is doing that. I just found him to be this sweetheart of a guy. I mean, I never interacted with him before. I just briefly said, something in my broken Tamil, which I don't think he understood, and he said, haha, okay, and then he left. I remember joking about it with the team management. Like, I think it was Ravi Shastri, I think, like, said, Ravi bhai, usko de do na. अरे नटराजन को खिला दो यार, मैं तो बोलता हूँ. He's like, दे दे. I said, ha 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 ha, and then we laughed. Like, nobody would have imagined that 1 month later he would actually make his debut. And it was just, you just knew that, after that point, like I said in Mel's show, the script is being written by someone who's really high, so it cannot have like a normal ending. Haddon and I were doing we did a lot of commentary from we were the Sydney team. So during the whole declaration of the Australian, he kept saying that, man, I think they should just 250. I think they should dangle the carrot. And I remember coming up with an awful line, which I'm proud of now. I said, no, the way this Indian team's playing, if they dangle a carrot, they'll turn it into carrot halwa. So it's an awful line, but but I'm proud of it now. So it was funny. And then, the one thing I really did appreciate that SEN did for me was, because there was this whole talk, Gabba. Firstly, it doesn't even sound good. So I kept saying that, look, everybody, so I was doing a lot of radio interviews, like, during that whole thing. Like, people would call me from different parts of the country and like, Bharat, you're the guest on our show. I was like, yeah, cool. So it became like one running theme during that Gabba test. I was like, look, nobody thought the Undertaker's streak would end, but then Brock Lesnar brought it to an end, right? So, all streaks are there to end and all that. So on the fifth morning, so my first stint on radio was always like 20 minutes before the day, or 20 minutes like leading into the start of play. So that day when I went into the studio, and Jared Waitley, the main host, he said that, oh, Bharat, before we introduce you, we have something special for you. It's like, okay. And they actually played a clip of Brock Lesnar beating Undertaker, like just with the commentary and all that. And they're like, they were predicting this, mate. So is this going to happen? They're chasing like 300 odd, like whatever it was. And I said, well, I think purely now that you played that music, I can't go back on my word. So I kept predicting that T. Natarajan would score the winning runs, because that's how the whole thing was going. I remember Ian Healy was in the Brisbane studio. He said that, oh, like I'll give you like some $200 if that happens. And I said, okay, Ian, you're on. And as the day wore on, like, we had a little WhatsApp group. So like they would keep making fun of me, saying, ha, like, keep the money ready, because, there's no way India is going to win this. But then the way Shubman Gill treated Mitchell Stark that day, it was, I still think Mitchell Stark should not have played. My dear Michael Neser should have made his debut at the Gabba, but that didn't happen. But, that really changed the way you looked at this game. It's like, wow, like, India is really going for this. And then Rahane's innings, it was very brief. But that's when I realized, oh, India are actually going for the win. They're going for broke here. Like, it doesn't. And why not? With that team, there's no point in trying to, like, when things are going your way, or the script is going a certain way, go for the kill. And that's what, that was very apparent once Rahane came. And just the way Pujara started batting after lunch, the intent in his running between the wickets, you're like, wait, are India actually serious about this? Is this a repeat of Adelaide 2014, which I thought till that point I think is still the most emotional test match I've ever covered. But, so many people criticize them for going for that total and then not looking for a draw. But that's when you realize they're going for it. And then, of course, in the first innings, there was the Washington Sundar Shardul Tagore partnership that came from nowhere. Shardulkar was like smashing Hazelwood down the ground for 6, and it was, you didn't know who's going to do what in that test match. And I'm actually disappointed it didn't end up with T. Natarajan, like, scoring the winning runs and all that. And so generally my stint would end by T, like on radio. But that day, because India were getting close, they said, no, you should be there. Basically, they wanted me to do the Harsha Bhogle / Ravi Shastri role, like towards the end, like, and I'm not like, like I said, I didn't grow up an Indian cricket fan.
Pant finishes it off in style.
Yeah. So I had to think of something else. I didn't have to call, so I had to react to the call. I was a color guy anyway,
Okay.
In more ways than one. So I said, I remember, like, when India needed 5 runs or something, I said, this is the right time. I said, mate, guys, I have a confession. I've never been an Indian cricket fan. I've always been a West Indian cricket fan. But then, today I have to say I'm converted. Like, I'm like rooting for this team, and I'm constantly thinking, like, dude, I'm not Harsha Bhogle. I can't add that whole that whole gravitas to it. I'm not Ravi Shastri. I can't say like, like you said, Pant finishes it off in style. So I have to come up with something. So I'm constantly thinking, like, half my mind is on the game, but half I'm thinking about making this sound relevant. I still don't know what I said, but they really loved it, because Ian Healy said, oh, I'm with Bharat. Like, I'm feeling emotional right now. He never gave me my money, but he said that I'm feeling really emotional right now. This is the greatest series win of all time. Because I said that. I said, this is the greatest moment in Indian cricket history. This is the greatest win for India. It's the greatest series win, because look, if you put everything into context, there is no comparison. And 2005 Ashes, like, it pales in comparison, just for all the drama and everything that's happened. And the fact that they're playing with bowlers who are like, their number 7, 8, 9 choice fast bowlers are, like, playing in the test match. You're playing at the Gabbatoir, where they have not lost for so many years. It's just, it wasn't really like Brock Lesnar beating the Undertaker. I remember saying there was almost like some random, some jobber almost coming up from nowhere and beating the Undertaker, ending his streak. So it was just the most remarkable test match, test series, and it couldn't have ended in any other way. I mean, you kind of try to write that script, and you just can't see Australia winning that last test. It just doesn't fit right. Like, in Australia 2-1, I don't. Now we're saying that, yeah. I mean, as Indian fans, people would have been like, yeah, TK. I don't think it would have been TK. It had to end with India winning, and they did.
And I think the famous line in the Hindi commentary was actually "Toota hai Gabba ka ghamand," is what they use,
Oh,
which is pretty strong. But I mean, just I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this. Just the shot Rishabh Pant hitting it down the ground, Saini with a torn calf muscle or hamstring sprinting up and down. I mean, and then the moment apparently where Rahane alphaed Nathan Lyon by gifting him a jersey signed by all the players,
ah,
which was apparently the nicest alpha male move of all time. Which was yeah. What did you have to what did you have to say about that?
no, but that just tells you a lot about Rahane. I mean, like when Cam Green got not Will Pakowski got hit in that warm up game by Karthik Tyagi. Um, like the Indian team had almost packed up and they were about to leave, but Rahane said, no, 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 I need to go check on Will Pakowski, and like I cannot leave without checking on him. I remember he went and checked, like he couldn't see him, but he went and checked, and then as he was walking off, he said, "Nahi yaar, theek hai yaar, wo, I think, but series mein khele aage pata nahi." But he's just genuinely like that kind of guy. He like he's the one who'll pick up all the bottles after the the whole after the at the end of day's play. And yeah, I think it was just, I think it was a genuine, like maybe they had planned it. Maybe even India thought, anyway hum series har jayenge, to like Nathan Lyon ko de denge. And
Get some
yeah,
bogey
Nathan Lyon's
points.
100 test match, I mean, when he started that series, he was on 390 wickets. He's still 399. Like who would have thought, like,
Yeah.
yeah, that, because it was all about Lino and all other Australians who played 100 test matches, recording a video message for him. And it was, I remember we went to Young, where Nathan Lyon is from, this where that's called the cherry capital of Australia, this beautiful little town. And I had this wonderful story on Nathan Lyon ready. I still haven't written it, because how do you write that story in the midst of, like,
Yeah.
I have the intro written, everything. I just didn't get that window to write that story. Especially, I thought, ठीक है, Gabba test, who knows India, kya hoga, we'll see. Especially after the start that Australia got off to, it's just, yeah, but it just also tells you from a very cricketing sense, uh, that Australia are really not that good a team. Like, they're a good team, but they're not a great team yet,
Mm.
not this slot. Because the fact that they didn't make 400 even once, I mean, that's the Australian way, right? In Australia, they'll bury you with runs, and then their bowlers are that good to, like, run through you. So that just did not happen.
And
Nathan
this time they
Lyon's a
had
big pro.
Smith and Warner as well, so
Yeah,
there was no
exactly.
excuse.
So no excuse. I think that really played a big role, because I think for the Indian team, just speaking to people, you got that sense that, look, when we won here last year, 2 years ago, more than Australians, Indians, like our own people, have said, always added a rider to our win, right? Like, disclaimer, ki, theek hai, you won without Smith and Warner. So I think that was another.
And you had Kohli, so you should have won. It's your
Exactly, yeah,
birthright. You should have won. Why would you lose?
absolutely, yeah. So now,
And
without
this time they
Kohli,
just
without
went
Bumrah,
all the way around.
yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, you had, like, I mean, it's amazing, right? I'm happy that that group of people will never play a test match together again. It's never going to happen.
No.
Natarajan's never going to play a test match again.
But he got
I don't
he
think
carried the trophy around the Gabba. I mean,
he did. He
he's
did. I
never going
mean,
to forget that his whole life.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it. Uh, Before Siraj really broke through, it was Natarajan's too, right? Like, coming as a net bowler, makes his T20 debut, makes his one-day debut. He's become a cult figure. I heard that they went to a temple somewhere, and he was like, this some South Indian temple in Sydney, and he was not mobbed by fans. I couldn't say that; that would have been a breach of the bubble. But, like, virtually mobbed by fans. So yeah, it was the tour of Natarajan before. Yeah, I don't know. I think every individual who was part of that tour, from the physio Nitin Patel to the strength and conditioning guy Soham, who was on his first tour, everyone had a tour that they will never forget. Everyone played their role. I mean, without those guys, this Indian team would not have stayed fit enough to even, like, even Ashwin and Bihari. Like, without Nitin Patel, like, somebody would have broken down and, like, would have had to be carried away. So Yeah, I don't think we'll ever have a series like that anywhere, really. I'll be honest. Like, people will think it's, I'm saying this because I was here or because it's India. A lot of people say a lot of things, but really doesn't matter. It's just that kind of. I mean, people compare the Ben Stokes innings with Kusal Pereira. Like, I was at the Ben Stokes uh, innings in at
Headingley,
Leeds.
Headingley.
Whereas I wasn't at the Kusal Pereira innings. So I don't know whether that's a fair comparison, but I put my hands up when the Sri Lankans, Andrew Fernando, says that no, that was as great an innings as Ben Stokes. Maybe it was,
Yeah,
but when people try to compare this series to anything else, I don't think there is any comparison because of everything that happened. I
yeah,
mean,
and
nowhere else will people like two batsmen exchange a
a back
iPad.
guard.
Yeah, exactly. It was just strange.
And I mean, it's also things like Rohit Sharma coming in, doing 2 weeks in the bubble in the midst of the test matches. So there was nobody who was a passenger on that plane. We
No,
literally used everyone that we took out there, which is the everybody contributed, everybody played their part in some way. It was just incredible. But Bharat, we are also here, and Varun has waited patiently for over an hour to
yes,
talk
and
to
my
you
laptop
about.
battery is also running out. So that's why I've been looking up there like
No, fair
constantly.
enough. He wants to ask you about the Rena book, right?
Yes,
Because
yes, of course,
he's
yeah,
the
yeah.
big fan. So when is this coming out? What has prompted you to write it? And also tell us about, apparently you're writing a book about the Aussie tour. So hopefully some of this will be covered in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll just briefly talk about the book on the Aussie tour. It is in the making, so it hopefully should be done and should be out by the end of the year. Maybe I don't know when yet, but but I had to finish the Raina book first. So the Raina book is basically, it's like a memoir of his, but they wanted it to be about lessons from his life that people can learn from. So I mean, it came to me very similarly to the way the Dhoni book came to me via Penguin. Like, they approached me, and like for the Dhoni book, they approached me and said like, can you write a book on Dhoni? And I said no. And then anyway, I've spoken about it many times about how that book came about. So then I had like a working relationship, at least with Radhika, who's been my publicist, I guess. She'll kill me if I got the title wrong, but yeah. So she approached me in September. She said that, look, Suresh Raina wants this book written, like, it'll be his book, and his team have come to me and I've said, no, Bharat has to do it. And I mean, Suresh Raina and I, again, he's like you said earlier, like my generation cricket, like this team that won in Australia. Like, I was telling someone recently, like, this is my generation team, right? Like Ashwin and Kohli and Rahane and Jadeja, Pujara, all of them literally like, we all got into the industry at the same time. I hate saying I made my test debut because I haven't played test cricket yet. So the first test I covered is kind of around the same time. A lot of them made their debuts. So it's all, and similarly, Raina. And so we've, of course, known each other through the cricketing circles for quite a while now. And I'd done one interview with him alongside Sriram Veera in 2016, before the T20 World Cup. And that's when I learned his story, like, his real story. We spoke about being ragged in hostels and, his family life and everything. And I thought, wow, that's a fascinating story. So that was done. So last year in September, when they came and said, if we want you to write this book with him, or like, for him, I said, yeah, sure. I mean, this is what I would like it to be. Like, it has to be his life story. And then you talk about what he's learned from it, and then hopefully people pick up something from it and get some. And I think it's an interesting story, his life story, like where he comes from. Like I said, all these people. It's called Believe because Sachin Tendulkar had given him like hashtag Believe, because he'd given him a message of sort of slogan of sorts when he worked with him in 2014, saying believe in yourself. And he got his first tattoo done, which is Believe, somewhere on his arm, I think. That's why he wanted to call it Believe. That's where the title comes from. And yeah, I mean, so it's about people who influenced him in his career, in his life, like Tendulkar and Dravid and Greg Chappell, Dhoni, of course. And it's about, like, his partner, like Priyanka. Australia में रह के मैं wife नहीं बोलता हूँ आजकल, partner बोलता हूँ. His wife, like, Priyanka, the influence she's had, parenthood, his family, like how he stood up to bullying. I mean, he didn't always stand up to bullying. He kind of gave up on his hostel life, but then went back to it, like, overcame that bullying through his cricket. And I think it's quite an interesting story. So I made it the story. So I wrote the whole thing, for him. That's why my name's on the cover as well. So we had lots of conversations during, and I wrote it all during this crazy tour. So I don't know
Wow.
why I always picked the wrong time to write a book. Like, even with the Dhoni book, wrote it when I was at my busiest at work at the Indian Express. Again, like, while I'm covering all this madness with like borders and all that, I was still writing a book. Thankfully, at the end of the tour, I couldn't come back to Adelaide. Like, I was in Sydney, right, after the Brisbane test. So I called South Australia Health, and they said, "Oh, drive around regional New South Wales for 2 weeks, and then you can avoid quarantine." So that's what I did. So I drove around. I spent 2 nights at Mel's house in Orange with her family. After that, I was just, yeah, going and meeting random people, like, and like, who I even went and met um, this girl, this journalist in Sydney who I've never met, but I spent like 1 hour in her hometown with her partner's father. And it was quite an interesting conversation, like, with him. So he was like, "So who are you again?" Like, "So how do you know how do you know her again?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know her. And why are you here? And why are we having coffee with each other?" Like, I have 8 days to kill. So that's where I wrote I think one whole chapter of the Rana book. So that home, like her. So she thinks
Nice.
it's credit to her, gives credit to, attributes it to her hometown. But yeah, I mean, with 3% left on my laptop battery, the Rana book is out, I think, end of May. The pre-orders are already
24th of
on.
May, Bharat.
Yes, oh, I think so.
24th.
That's right. Yeah, it got delayed because of the IPL and all that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and with the terrible situation in India right now, the lockdowns and all that. But yeah, I think it's an interesting story. I'll be honest. When I got into it, like I said earlier, I wasn't sure how many people are out there who want to read about Suresh Raina, but I've been very happy to know that there are a lot of people.
India's,
And don't,
I would say one of India's best team players. I mean, there's a
yeah.
picture that circulates in Adelaide 2015 World Cup where I was sitting in the stands watching both of them bat. And you could see Raina was happier when Kohli hit a century
Yeah,
than Kohli himself, right? The fist
that's
pump
true.
and the running. So India's greatest team man.
He
You've got at
that
least
that
one reader, Bharat.
I know. I'm very
Varun's
happy.
going to be reading it.
For
You only
sure.
need one. Journey of
I
a
know. I
million
know.
copies starts with one.
You can buy 1,000 copies and read it 1,000 times. That also contributes to the success of the book. So, no, it's no. You're right. You're right. I mean, he is that kind of person. He is very giving in many ways. I think you could see it on the field. Like, he always, like you said, Warren, he always enjoyed others' successes, and yeah. And I think he's a very underrated white ball cricketer overall. And arguably India's best fielder before Ravindra Jadeja. I mean, Ravindra Jadeja to me is the best fielder the world has ever seen. But before him, Suresh Raina was, yeah, right up there. I mean, he was India's best fielder before Jadeja. And yeah, I mean, Greg Chappell thought he was the next Brian Lara. I mean, didn't turn out to be the next Brian Lara. But yeah, I think if there was no, if Dhoni and Yuvraj hadn't happened, I think we would have been talking a lot more about Suresh Raina.
Still a World Cup winner and I think, Champions Trophy winner as well. So
Yeah.
incredible. Bharat, it has been absolutely amazing to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. While we've been speaking, I've already thought of the title of this show, and it's going to be From Ghatkopar to Gabba. So
Ah,
I've got
beautiful.
my conclusion.
Yeah. I mean, till the time you have Ghatkopar in there, like, yeah, you
That's
warmed
it.
my
That's
heart.
it. But thank
Thanks
you
so much.
again. It's been amazing. We would love to have you back on the show. We could actually just next time you just charge your laptop. We could actually chat for hours. If you're in the UK or Singapore ever, we would love to just sit down with you and pick your brain about cricket. It is absolutely. It's been a pleasure. We've just really enjoyed this chat. It's gone way over the allotted time. So thank you again for making the time. This is the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast brought to you by Seat Tires. Stay home and stay safe. See you next week.